start from, given the fact of God's existence, what has he disclosed about reality, if he has anything, which may speak about angels? And in fact, he has in the Gospel, in the Quran, and other places. So angels' existence is epistemologically certain, given God's reliability as a maximally great being who gives omniscient and true information. But if we start from our individual consciousness, like you're doing, it doesn't get us very far. We kind of walk two little steps, and then all of these dimensions, all this metaphysical reality, is like pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps. You can't get there because we're starting from the wrong place. If we start from somewhere else, we'll get to that destination.
Here's where I think we agree. I think I'm coming from a phenomenological position.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Heidegger, that kind of thing, Husserl, I think, that you start with what you can be certain of and you work outward because you understand that you will deceive yourself, and you pursue self-consistency as best you can. And then hopefully it leads you to more complicated conclusions and axioms that you can have some faith in, such as your faith or another faith and belief in various disciplines, scientific and whatever. But I come at it phenomenologically. You're coming at it from what I can only describe as an article of faith. You're starting with an article of faith, and that's fine. It doesn't mean it's wrong.
I don't think it's an article of faith.
Methodologically,
no.
I'm not framing this.
No, for me, it's not an article of faith. It is a fundamental fact, a reality of existence. God's existence is the a priori reality from which all other lesser realities are created. And I also think I would challenge your phenomenology there, because the existence of I, of the self, has been challenged all over the place by modern neuroscience, psychology, which even questions the existence of an I, a subjective I, that exists through time. So even your certainty now, your Cartesian certainty, has broken down in the light of very hostile critiques from postmodern deconstructionalism and something like that. But the belief in the reality of God as the uncaused cause, the fundamental fact of existence, remains intact, because we're not starting from our own fractured, questionable self. We're starting from the metaphysical absolute, and from that, acknowledging that fact, then we can learn things about unseen realms. We can learn about the existence of angels, which has been the trigger for our conversation. Do angels exist? How do we know angels exist? I know they exist because the maximally great being, who is called God, who is perfect and has all knowledge, has told us about this unseen realm, along with the Day of Judgment, the existence of demons, historical figures that I've never encountered before, a whole range of information which this being has accurately and infallibly communicated to us as a species. So I don't start from my own fractured, questioned self, which may not even exist according to many Western thinkers. I start from the unchanging, perfect ground of our being, also known as God. I think it's a great place to be, to have faith in God, rather than faith in a self, which is actually being questioned in the West now. Does it even exist?
I think,
and that would be, many neuroscientists would say, there is no self anymore.
I think faith is essential in any epistemology, and if atheists don't seem to understand that, but there's not a scientist in the world whose core axiom isn't something they have faith in and then they build up. So I'm not trying to knock faith. I think it's a matter of placing your faith at the optimum locus, most strategically and most honestly. Where do you make your statement of faith? What you're saying to me still sounds like you are making an assertion of faith as your core axiom, and that's fine. But you're talking about ontology and I'm talking about methodology. Within an ontological framework, you're correct, because what you're discussing would be the absolute ontological first principle, and everything would follow from that, and your description's correct. I'm investigating the methodology by which we reach that point. And I'm asserting that what you are making is an article of faith, and that may be a good thing, because we've all got to make them.
Depends what you mean by an article of faith. What do you mean by that?
An argument from faith. It means that everyone's got to have a first axiom that they're going to believe before they can proceed to a more complex series of inductions and deductions.
I'm with you on that.
Scientists and so on.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
The article of faith which you seem to be placing as your core axiom is that the Quran is sacrosanct and accurate on an ontological level. I think the thing I can be most certain of methodologically is that existence is occurring. When you just describe the fact that we've queried in the West whether there is an I or whatever, you're correct. That's why I didn't phrase it that way. I didn't say I even know. I don't know if I'm an I don't know if I'm a we. my level of certainty, my core axiom is experience is occurring. Maybe I'm dreaming, maybe I'm a multiplicity, but there ain't nothing happening. Something is occurring at a qualia level.
So you just said, to interrupt, you said you might be dreaming, but that would undermine your premise that your feelings are this certainty that give you epistemic certainty, and now from that you move out into other things. If you know the brain in the vat thing, you know, in philosophy, or you could be dreaming now. If you are dreaming now, then you're not actually having these experiences in the real world. They are a byproduct of your imagination while you're asleep. So how can you be certain, given your own point here, for those two objections, that you are having real experiences, objective, and not just the byproduct? You can't.
I'm cutting deeper than that.
Right.
I'm trying to, because
it doesn't give you certainty then.
Your point's exactly valid. Correct, but you're talking about how accurately can I interpret my experience, and I'm saying I'm cutting deeper than that. All I'm saying is I'm certain I am having experience. Before I can interpret what it is, and I will always be fallible in that, I have to acknowledge I am having it. So qualia is occurring and inevitable.
What's qualia mean for everyone?
Qualia would be a property of a subject as opposed to an object. Examples being feelings, instincts, thoughts, emotions, predispositions, hopes, dreams, pain, pleasure, all of the things that you assume this pad hasn't got, but I know I'm certain I have, and I'm almost certain you have, yeah? Qualia. In other words, the stuff that counts, the stuff that gives teleology and morality and all the important stuff.
If I could respond, I think the basis of your you've written is not certainty. You have feelings, but you can't be certain that the feelings you're having are not actually the imagination working in a dream state. In other words, you could be dreaming you're having these feelings. So we're experiencing heat from the sun here now. It's possible that actually you are in a cold room back in February, or in February, dreaming you're a speaker's corner during a heat wave. So your feelings in that case are not a reliable guide to what's actually going on. It could just be a fiction that you're and secondly, the famous experiment of the brain in the vat. So an evil genius is manipulating our brains to make us believe as an illusion, obviously, that we are having various states of experience. So whatever experience you could say could be just triggered by an evil genius who's got our brains in a vat in a laboratory. So your methodology is premised then on experiences that you can't even verify are authentic, because the experience itself is quite different. If you're experiencing heat from the sun, but you're actually lying in bed in February during the winter, you can't say that's just experiencing the heat of the sun, analogous in any way to our actual experiencing the heat of the sun now in August. You may think that they're not the same experience. One is wholly illusory, with devoid of any objective content back in February. This one, which I'm taking is real, is real because we're going to get sunburnt if we're not careful. And we're going to experience real consequences. So I think your easy acceptance of the intrinsic identity of these two different things as just as experience is questionable as well, because one could be false, another one could be. So one could be false, or there could be true.
I'm really trying very hard to express that I understand any diagnosis I give or interpretation can be wrong. I'm not laying that as my core axiom. My core axiom is that experience is occurring. That's all. I'm not, everything that you've just said, if you were to play the tape back, I believe, were examples of how I might have misdiagnosed my experience. But I can't diagnose it until it's already on the table as a certainty.
But how do you know you've misdiagnosed it?
Oh, you don't know diagnosis. Now, diagnosis is methodology, and now we're going deeper, and it's epistemology.
No, I ask that not to be awkward, but because it's easy to say, X is... my dream-like experience of the heat of the sun is an illusion, and we can just diagnose that. But it comes back to the question, how do we know we're asleep and we're awake, for example?
Very important.
And so, maybe you have a solution to this, but it seems to me a tad facile just to say, we can diagnose things as illusory. But how do we do that? I'm not sure how you do that.
Hand in hand.
How do we do that?
You're right, we have to do that. It's essential, and that's a lot of the hard work. But to be aware of what your core axiom is. Now, if your core axiom is a certainty in any given interpretation of your experience, it may be flawed, which is why I think Descartes, although he overstated it, and the mystics, what we're trying to say is experience is occurring, that's all. We're not defining it, we're not interpreting it, we're just like everyone to agree that the unique property of a subject is happening here, and I assume for you as well, that doesn't happen to objects. If we start with that as a thing which is not cognitively certain because it's pre-intellectual, yeah? It's just the immanence of subjective experience is unavoidable. Then the argument is how best to diagnose it. Yeah?
Okay, I mean, I just don't think this kind of experience that we are speaking of is a terribly reliable way epistemologically to gain knowledge, because it is vulnerable to critique. And the two examples I give, these are well-known, as you know, well-known examples in philosophy. I'm not saying anything new here. There's a standard critique of Descartes and so on. But in terms of the existence of God, this is you mentioned your definition of faith, and I think I would go with that. So we've got to have first principles that we accept. And I think the religious answer, that the existence of God as an a priori first principle, from which we then understand everything else, is, for me, axiomatic. The existence of God is self-evident. It's hardwired into our natures as a species. Countless academic surveys have shown that the human race, at all times and places, whether it be in secular societies or highly religious societies, children naturally believe in a higher power. They believe in God. The conclusion seems to be that it's part of it is what it is to be human. Yeah. So that this is part of our nature to believe in God. Atheism is unnatural. It goes against our natures. It goes against the world we see around us, which has all these signs of a transcendent mind having brought this into being. So that's where I would start, with God, and then from that, methodologically, flow all the other issues about the existence of angels, whether or not the Quran is the word of God, how we live good lives, what is the purpose of life gets answered, gets addressed in that thing. But to start from the uncertain principle of experience, which can and cannot be illusory, and we have no way, I think, of deciding from that basis what is illusory and not, is a very uncertain way of living life. I don't see it as very fruitful.
I totally hear you. Unfortunately, I do believe that seems to be the human condition. It seems to be where I've landed. It seems to be where we've landed, and we should grapple with it. As a test, I'm happy that when the world's religions, including Islam, say this is an important test. Yeah. And we have to then start trying to diagnose and understand the world around us. I'm coming in from a phenomenological perspective.
I know.
You're coming in stating quite correctly that if you're correct about the ontologically about God, then obviously we should all focus on that. It should be our first principle and everything from there.
Exactly.
Okay, and I get.
But why do you object to that? I mean, I know you have your phenomenological methodology, but I'm not quite clear why you have chosen that methodology in the first place, because it seems to me not to offer much in the way of yaqeen, certainty, whereas the metaphysical grounding of our lives in existence, the unchanging existence of the eternal God, the Creator, seems a much better place to root oneself. And if that is the case, why haven't you done that? That's my question to you.
Actually, my own cognitive bias. I used to believe in miracles, and I'd love to believe in God in the full-blown sense that you do.
Okay.
So the appeal of that is clear to me.
So why not then? You haven't given a reason why you don't.
Well, a lot. I mean, because my second axiom is a self-consistency principle. If the first is I am, the second axiom is I'll view everything from as many different angles as possible and try and be self-consistent. And part of that is being aware of my own psychology. And the very fact that I want to believe this so much should caution me against my own cognitive bias. Yeah? I feel it should. Because I think honesty and truth are virtues, and religions, they alert you to pursue truth almost above all else. Yeah? If you follow the truth, you will get to God. Now, sometimes that puts you on a path where you've got uncomfortable conflicts with how you feel and your biases. So I'm just trying to handle the truth as honestly as I can, because I think it's the best anybody can do. And I think religion tests you to do that. I think that's what religion's asking you to do. Have faith even when things don't make sense. So although I'm not embracing the view that you have, I can feel the appeal of it.
Yeah, you talk about cognitive bias as if that's necessarily a bad thing. But I think from a Muslim point of view is because we're hardwired to believe in God anyway as a species, this is not a bias we need to be worried about. This is something wisdom lies in recognizing the way we're made and living according to it. So I have needs and desires and understandings. To live by those wisely is a good thing.
Agreed.
To see them as biases that I need to be wary of is perhaps an unduly skeptical reserve in the face of what does it mean to live a good life.
Yeah.
So we should optimistically and gladly embrace good things, especially when our bias conforms to them, because that means we're on the right track, because we are made to act in certain ways. So if I get pleasure from doing good things, good works, being kind to people, that's my cognitive bias. I'm not going to woo. I'm not going to start worrying about that and saying maybe I should course correct and not be good. Use that positive trajectory, capitalize on it, develop it in healthy ways. Likewise, the belief in God, which is natural to our species, I believe, is a wholesome and a healthy reality we need to capitalize on by using our minds to actually ask those questions. Well, who was Jesus? Who are the prophets? What has God actually said? Has he said anything to mankind? So we can then investigate further into the Quran, the Bible, and so on, and ask those further questions about the details of that. But the fundamental orientation is a healthy one and should be affirmed and gone with, like many other healthy attributes that one may have. They're not biases. These are positive instincts that we should cultivate and develop. So good instincts should be followed, but I don't think religious belief is a bad instinct because it's in accord with our natures and existence of God.
I wasn't presuming it was automatically, with my bias automatically would damn it. I just think it's wise to be aware of your bias. I didn't want to overstate the bias thing, yeah?
In that sense, that's a very moderate thing to say, but we should be cautious, but I think we shouldn't build in caution to make it an epistemic principle such that it inhibits us from actually moving forward in our lives.
I'm not running away from religion because I'm aware of my cognitive bias. That wouldn't be a good enough reason in and of itself. I'm just noticing it in the balance of pros and cons.
Right.
I'm just factoring in a bit of my own cognitive bias. I think what I'm liking that we agree, I like to find points of agreement with people as much as possible. You said it's about living well, how you live well. I totally agree with you. I think in all of this, you need to ask yourself, what's the first question being asked?
Exactly.
And I think the first question that all religion is asking and all human beings will always ask themselves is, how do I live well? How do I make good choices? Is that something we could agree on? That's an intrinsic question. It's maybe the first question to ask. It's certainly one of them.
I think Islamically it would be not so much, it would be what does God want of me in this situation? So we accept already the existence of God and revelation and prophets. So then we'd ask, given this situation, what does God want me to do in this situation? So it wouldn't be a more fundamental question of why am I here? Oh, that's important too. But for a healthily functioning religious person, they should be asking what's the will of God in this situation. So they've gone beyond the does God exist phase or who is God phase to saying I trust that God is Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, the most compassionate, most merciful. What does he want me to do with this situation, with this elderly woman who's trying to cross the road here? What does God want me to do now? And asking that question is the point now, not whether or not God exists. That is something we've already agreed upon. It's not we, I mean, people generally already accept that anyway. So the question is, what does this God want me to do? So your question is.
People agree on it is not accurate.
Well, I think 99% of humankind have always agreed on that. Absolutely.
Really?
Oh yeah.
I mean,
Absolutely.
if you straw poll the 8 billion people on the planet right now, I think you'll find it's not just 1% of them.
I think. What I understood, I could be wrong, that atheists make up only 1 or 2% of the global population, and the thing is, it's a decreasing percentage of the world's population. Atheism is becoming less and less chosen by people globally now. I'm not saying there are no atheists, by the way. There have always been atheists, but I'm saying that, generally speaking, our humanity has been profoundly religious. And even, very interestingly, I read a survey recently conducted by, I think it was 5 universities, some of which were in Britain, and they did surveys of atheists, self-defined atheists around the world, Japan, South America, Finland, and so on. And they found that the majority of people who call themselves atheists believe in the supernatural. They believe in angels, life after death. They might believe in jinn. Now, they don't believe in God. Oh no, we're atheists. But we believe in all this other stuff. Now, excuse me, I mean, that strikes me as... So the conclusion for me there is that the Richard Dawkins type of hardcore materialist atheists are a minority even of atheists. Most atheists would say either there is life after death, or there are angels, or there are spirits, or whatever. they're not like Dawkins. So even the atheists are disagreed about what it even means to be atheist. As a wasp.
I'd agree that atheists will exist on a spectrum.
Yes.
And that all of them need to understand they have an article of faith within their belief system, it's unavoidable. And this is something that religion can teach atheists, just so they're aware of their own mechanisms. I would be amazed if your statistic that only 1% of the planet are atheists. I would be stunned.
It could be 3%. I don't be maybe I misquoted that. It's a very tiny number of people in the globe who identify as atheists.
I would dispute what you just said, but I've got no way of proving it. And
well, we could Google it now.
Okay, we could, but let's not, because we're at the heart of things anyway.
Okay.
I contextualise it.
Whatever it is, it's a tiny minority of the world's population. The vast majority of the planet, and I would say even most atheists, have religious beliefs.
And I counter that by saying I don't think reality is a popularity contest.
This is true.
So actually, I'm really not very swayed by the numbers game or anything. In fact, generally speaking, the truth is at the cutting edge of people's understanding, and as it's entering the picture, there's very few people who have got the finger on the pulse. So what the majority is doing is nearly...
Okay, no, that is a valid point, and I'm not saying that the majority equals correctness or truth, but I was just bearing witness to the fact, as I keep on saying, our species is a profoundly religious animal, but this religious sense, this instinct, bears authentic and accurate witness to that which it has, which is referring to, the existence of the transcendent.
Yeah.
I think it's objectively true, as well as the human experience. The human experience is not wrong in this case, although majority votes can be wrong. In this case, it is right. Just because majorities are sometimes wrong doesn't mean they're always wrong. Sometimes they're right.
Yeah, no, sometimes they're very, very right.
Sometimes they're very right, sometimes they're very wrong. But on this issue of fundamental metaphysics, our human race is right.
Yeah.
And I think we're still seeing the fruit of that now, where Islam is the fastest growing religion in the world. Religions generally are booming everywhere on the planet, apart from here in Western Europe and in many parts of the US. But Eastern Europe, religion is very, very strong socially. In Russia, China, Africa, South America, the Far East, everywhere, religion is really taken very seriously by people, apart from here.
Thank goodness, reality.
Apart from Speaker's Corner. But I agree with your point.
We're agreeing that human beings come with an a priori nature, yeah? And I think this is crucial. So to me, when it comes to a lot of these discussions, the primary line is between blank slate thinking and a priori thinking. Yeah? In the a priori camp sit all the religious communities who believe in soulmates and so on. All the faiths have that in common. And strangely enough, if you're a Darwinian, same thing.
You could accommodate that. Yeah, you could do. Yeah. Who's an atheist.
Who's an atheist, but we're actually all sitting on the same side. I think in the moral battle of how to live, the primary problem is with people who would represent that there are no intrinsic values or rights.
Yeah, I like the way you described it, the blank slate. I think this is one of the fictions of our Western era, that we somehow come into the world without any beliefs, any predispositions to believe anything. It's a crazy idea. It's not true to lived experience, and it has little science to back it up either.
Completely. But that means that even Paris is in the same camp with us thus far. I know we're going to fractionate out, but it's good to find the common core ideas that we share and to examine them constructively, and not just do what seems to happen around speakers most of the time, which is this eternal bashing about, how many times can we do the Trinity? You know what I mean?
Quite a lot, it seems.
Well, it's such a shame. Actually, I'd appreciate your view on the Trinity, just for a second. It seems to me that in Islam, you believe that God is extrinsic to creation, I think. So he creates the universe from outside. And therefore, when you hear about the Trinity, to you it seems crazy that something infinite has suddenly truncated itself into something small and finite. It just doesn't make sense. And I can understand why. In the Christian tradition and the Kabbalistic tradition and others, we come from the Spinoza type view. We come from the view that God is intrinsic. Now, if God is intrinsic, obviously God is in Jesus, because God is everywhere. So to us, it's not so mentally jarring. It's illogical from your framework if God is extrinsic. but you don't seem to appreciate how natural and non-contradictory it is from a framework where we believe God is intrinsic. Now, I don't know who's right about intrinsic or extrinsic, but isn't that the level to have the debate at? Because that's what's underpinning the problem. Instead of this eternal thing, and I think it's rather disingenuous when people make out they can't wrap their head around the idea of the Trinity. I don't happen to believe in the Trinity. I think the Muslims are correct in their critique of the Trinity and original sin, but I can mentally wrap my head around the possibility of it, and when I hear people talking about it's outrageously illogical, I don't think they're being very honest. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think there are many reasons why the Trinity idea is questionable. My own preferred method, which is not necessarily the Islamic method at all, it's just my own personal view, is that responsible mainstream historical scholarship has, I think, come to the conclusion that it's highly unlikely that Jesus thought he was God.
I saw you do quite a long talk with somebody where you seem to be saying that Paul had misrepresented Jesus.
Whoever did it, or it may not be a question of just one individual doing it. I don't think Paul believed in the Trinity either. The Trinity is a later concept developed in the church. So it's anachronistic to attribute it to any first century writer. But I think the evidence is very good that the historical Jesus was a first century Palestinian Jew who practiced Judaism, the Israelite religion, and did not think that he was Yahweh. There's a lot of evidence, early evidence, historical evidence suggests that's the case. So the question of the Trinity is simply not on the table when it comes to that methodology. As regards the, so Trinity is simply not there in Jesus' own experience. So it's just out the window. But if you want to look at the doctrine in itself, I think it is incoherent because, as the Athanasian.
Even if God is intrinsic to reality,
well, let me explain. Let me explain how.
It becomes less incoherent with you have an intrinsic God. You think it's equally incoherent no matter which.
Well, let me explain why I think it's incoherent. Because I don't want to be constrained by the Spinozian terms of reference here. I have my own other reasons for nothing to do with Spinoza's concept of God, which I'm not sure I entirely understand either. Having read Spinoza's book Ethics, where he discusses God or nature, I'm thinking, what are you getting at here, Spinoza?
But you're way ahead of me then. I haven't read Spinoza. I've read around and about.
Spinoza, I read it when I was doing philosophy at uni, and I thought, I'm not impressed. Anyway, I'm not going to go there. My own reasons for seeing the doctrine of the Trinity is incoherent, nothing to do with Spinoza. If we take the Athanasian Creed, for example, Athanasian Creed is a 6th century creed, not actually by Athanasius, who was a 4th century Jew, but nevertheless is a creed that's recited in the Catholic Church, in the Orthodox Church, in the Church of England, and it says, in part, that the Father is fully God, the Son is fully God, and the Holy Spirit is fully God. But they're not three gods, there's one God. Now, simply saying that they're not three gods but one God doesn't really satisfy me when you've already stated that the Father is fully God, and the Son is fully God, and the Holy Spirit is fully God. And they're not the same, they're distinct beings. This is what I would call tritheism. Now, it's not that I don't have a Spinozian understanding of metaphysics, it's a simple common sense that three is not one and one is not three. In that definition of the Trinity, you can't have three fully gods and be a monotheist. And I think Jesus was, as a good Jew, was a monotheist.
If you take it that literally, and I don't believe in the Trinity. Okay?
No, I know.
So I'm not here to wave the flag for the Trinity.
I'm not sure why we're talking about it, to be honest. If you don't believe it, I don't believe it.
Because the conversation we're having now is something else I have are far more interesting to construct it.
Okay.
And it's a shame that so much clickbait is hammering this. It seems to me that a lot of the baseline conservative Muslims are looking for the weakest arguments in Christianity, they find the Trinity, and they hammer that one point. And I'm not surprised.
I agree that I think that's not a great way to do. It's not a great way to do dawah, and I'm as guilty as anyone because you're out to destroy your enemy, and then you talk about Islam. That's not dawah. Dawah is about calling people to the truth of Islam, not about destroying the enemy. But by finding arguments to undermine their faith. I mean, you can argue that Jesus is not God based on the Quran, of course, but the kind of way it's done, without regard to the whole person and to attacking this kind of adversarial, aggressive discourse, I think is not really dawah. It's ego-driven.
There are some good people here, though, as well.
No, I'm not in any way saying I'm better than anyone else, because I've done it as well. over the years.
So
So
you're already good because you're aware of it and that. And
Yeah.
I respect you, and I hear you're respected by quite a few people here who I respect.
Alhamdulillah.
So you're much better to talk to. There are other people here I won't
Anyway,
know.
all I'm saying is that I've made lots of mistakes, and I'm not in any way better than anyone else. But for me, the royal road to getting the truth about the Trinity and Jesus is, because of my interest in this academically, it is history. And there is a ton of evidence to suggest that Jesus didn't think he was divine at all. It happens that the Quran confirms that, and I expect it would do because the Quran is from God, but that's where I come from, and it's confirmed by revelation as well. So I have that kind of two-pronged approach to the subject.
Where I come from on this is I assume that Jesus was just a man anyway.
Right.
To me, because I'm a bit of a romantic or something, where I'm thinking, okay, to me that enhances the power. Okay? To me, Superman is not an impressive character.
No, indeed, yeah.
Because Superman has no fear. Superman isn't even brave. He has no fear because he's indestructible.
Exactly.
I think
this is a very
what
good point. It's a very good
about
point.
Christianity is that the guy is very, very vulnerable and very human.
Yeah.
And I look at that and then I say, Jesus to me exemplifies the best that human nature can do in the life he lives. He's the most exemplary example I know of. And in that respect, in that regard, I call myself a Christian. And I suspect that Christians are instinctively reacting to him at that level. And then the intellectual architecture surrounding it after sometimes is on point and sometimes it's off, because it's all works in progress. But it's a great shame to see two traditions at each other's throats as much as this over what I think is more trivial small print, when we have so much in common. We're not blank slaters. We think it's important to work out how to live a good life. We think all people are equal, I assume, intrinsically at the soul level.
At some level, yes. I don't think we're equal.
In terms of abilities, no.
I think in our access to God's grace and mercy, we're all equal,
Yes, at the most
male and female. Old. But in terms of this world, I think we're very unequal.
Sure.
Some people, I mean, the Quran speaks about this, and God has given some people authority and status and power, and other people's not. And that's part of our differing tests and trials in this life. But I don't think we're equal.
I think
At the horizontal level, I think we're very unequal.
Yeah, I think we're all equal as subjects,
Right.
and we're all unequal as objects. So we've all got different objective properties: height, strength, intelligence, whatever.
Exactly.
So if you look at people from the outside in, clearly they're different. But it's more important to look at them from the inside out, which I think religion has already.
I mean, for Muslims, just the level of the prophets and messengers, they're not our equals. Although they're just human, but they're not. I mean, so the problem of having a prophet would be a jewel, and I'll just be a grain of sand. There is a difference in quality in every sense. But nevertheless, we are equal in the sense of both being human before God and having access to God's mercy and access to the message of revelation. But in every other way, we're not equal.
Yeah, sure. But as long as we understand that the divine aspect of our equality is primary and our differences are secondary, as long as you put them in a value hierarchy like that, you're okay. When you start making our differences supersede our fundamental commonalities and our fundamental human worth, that's when you get problems, I think. And we concur on that as well, yeah?
More or less. Anyway, maybe...
Nice chat.
No, it was. Thank you very much for your gracious invitation to have a conversation as well. Appreciate it. So what's your name? I forget.
Tony.
Tony, of course. Tony. I'm Paul.
Yeah, no, I'd heard. I'd heard good things. So there's a young Muslim guy comes in, who's, I've forgotten his name now, some bad with names, who's fantastic, and he was raving about you. He said he learned more from your website than he learned from
but
so
that's
many
misleading. What he's saying is misleading. It's not me that he's learning from, it's my guests.
Okay, fine. No,
I'm not the star. The star of on most of my videos is some of the world's leading experts and scholars on the various subjects I talk to. It's not me, it's them.
Okay.
So in that sense, he's absolutely right. But it's not because it's me, it's because of the guests. We're absolutely clear.
I think he meant it in that spirit. I mean,
Good.
That you're like a Lex Fridman type. I mean, I really rate. Do you know Lex Fridman? He does a very good podcast. He's an offspring of sort of Joe Rogan. He's risen in that camp.
Oh, what's it called?
Lex Fridman. He normally does more science and computing.
I know who you mean. Yeah.
He always wears a black tie.
No, I think I know what you mean. In that case, that would be accurate. Yes, that would be true.
Well, he does a great show. And
He's got millions of followers, that guy.
Yeah, because he's very high quality.
And
I'm assuming you've got the same.
I'm not quite at his level, but we're in the same ballpark, if not the same level, Anyway, I'm going to dash.
Thank you very much.
And you too, mate.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
Should we?
Yeah, I don't know where these guys have gone.
Would you like these back?
I think they would.
Another time.
Inshallah.
I think we went as deep as you can.
You sure find something else? Surely we have our 4 years
Mine.
I put it.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay.
And another
Sorry,
one.
you guys have gone. Okay.